Greetings everyone, it's Seven from London with an urgent UK news update. We're talking to Horizon. We had to cut off because the video stops at 15 minutes, so apologies for that. It's Seven from London and we are doing a urgent news update. This is a news story that should be on every news mainstream news network, but isn't, and that is the crisis that is happening to single women of colour in the UK who are being marginalised, who are being disenfranchised, mavericks. We're not talking about people who are just bums that don't want to work. We're talking about people who are the brightest, brilliant sparks in the UK, are finding themselves being targeted, stalked, pushed into homelessness, family members being murdered, and them finding themselves in vulnerable positions, like my sister here has explained. Now, this is just a quick follow-up to the previous video. Please get it out. So, Horizon, you were just talking about how you were treated in the system and how you are being treated in the system. Can you explain your circumstances right now so that people can understand what has happened to you to put your life in a position of endangerment right now?
Okay, so where my situation has spun out of control, as I said, it's led to a life-saving operation where I had an uncontrollable, life-changing condition, which was endometriosis, which actually it affects many females universally.
Okay. So can I ask?
Yes.
So you're talking about endometriosis.
That's right.
And do you think that came about as a consequence to your circumstances, or is it something that you had anyway?
It came about and evolved because of the circumstances.
Can you speak a little bit louder, please?
Yes, it came about as a result of the consequences of my circumstances, where my health was in early menopausal. I was unable to make time for myself personally, and where it had been pushed to another level when I ought to have been resting. I couldn't pay attention to where my body was changing, and I was going over and above what I ought to be doing because of the fact that my parents were getting ill. I had a range of issues where I was left highly dependent on as a family member, and having to sacrifice and commute to my family, to my parents especially, and a lot of responsibility was left on me. When it came to the time where I needed the support from the state, and a lot of the responsibilities I was taking on myself financially, I quickly became into debt, couldn't manage my life in the south as well as commuting to the north of the country to aid my parents. And that was where I started to realise there is a huge decline in my health.
Okay, so now tell us about how you've been treated by the system. Give us some examples of... We don't have a great deal of time, so just give us some brief examples that show how you have been treated.
Okay, looking back in retrospect to where the situation could have been handled differently or better, I would say it would start from the starting point of the GP practice, where I used to turn up increasingly to say that I'm hemorrhaging. At that point, I ought to have been admitted directly from the GP practice directly to hospital and undergo a transfusion or being given the appropriate and right treatment. And because of that led to a sequence of issues where I became more and more vulnerable to the system, such as the healthcare system, passed around from one place to the other based on where my circumstances led me. So, for instance, the gynecology department, highly vulnerable in that respect, and that's where I started to suffer male discrimination from another race, unaware of that. Putting my trust and taking the advice was actually making me more vulnerable in taking decisions on my own, where I'm turning up to a hospital on my own, without no family, without no close friend or partner. That was making me highly vulnerable.
Okay, so do you think people exploited that vulnerability?
Absolutely, 100%.
Right. And how did they exploit that vulnerability?
Physically abused
Wow.
through gynecological
Malpractice?
malpractice with information, how they perceive you, and to a point where they see you as someone that's doing very well, but want to have you in a place where they can restrict you. And by doing that, they force me into a situation where they would play with my hemoglobin levels of where I hemorrhaged. I was suffering premature discharge, unplanned discharge. Within moments, I would lose a great amount of blood in a short space of time. A lot of blood had been taken from me each time, and that affected my hemoglobin level. Forced to come back into hospital to have it happen all over again, and passed around from one ward to the other, where I realised there was a lot of networks from one department to the other, and it was based on race.
Okay, and so how was you treated in the housing? Did they give you, how are you on the street as somebody who is clearly got serious health conditions? How have you been, why have you not been housed? Why have you not been supported to be given a house?
With the housing, I fell victim to the criminality of housing associations, situations where politically, being a victim, I was unprotected. I can't go into too much detail, but where I ought to have been protected by the state, I was never protected. Where referrals ought to have gone in to safeguard me or to protect me, where I was categorically a vulnerable adult, or where I'd fallen victim to the malpractice of these organisations who ought to have been regulated, and fall victim to their criminality, it led to a situation where drastically I was left street homeless, and that was a very harsh reality to face.
Right, so you were left street homeless even though you were sick. You didn't have anywhere to live because obviously you had your parents, you were stripped of your profession, and wow, it sounds like you've been through a hell of a lot, and I really empathize with you. My heart goes out to you, my sister, and I don't want you to let this deter you from what is your true path and your destiny. You're a maverick, you're a gifted person. If you were handpicked to work for Trump Tower, Trump only picks the best. Whether you like him or you don't like him, is an astute businessman. And if Mr. Trump had earmarked you and some of these big organizations that you've mention some of them again.
There was like Intercontinental Airlines, Fox News, CNN, Google, all the fashion houses, Yves Saint Laurent, Gucci, Valentino.
Wow.
Many great internship opportunities.
Right, and so for you to go from there to now being homeless.
And I was with one of the best accredited business school you could have. It was a European business school. very sought after.
Wow.
And I happened to have made that goal and that opportunity on my own,
Wow.
repeating a year of my degree without no support.
Wow.
I
That
had to
shows.
find the money for the accommodation myself. I had to hold on to where I felt like, well, a conflict where I felt personally burnt out, exhausted. Having to repeat a year was hard. And like, I felt, well, do the best you can, keep pushing, keep fighting. You've put in so much, and it's been hard. It's been a hard struggle, and I did it, and it truly surprised me to find that the merits of my efforts were rewarded, and it meant a lot to me.
Wow. And
Because I felt I had something for myself.
Okay, so that's been stripped from you. And so, how have you managed homelessness? Where have you slept? What have you? How have you survived?
It's been difficult.
How
very
long have you been
difficult.
homeless?
It's been since 2014
Wow.
because it's affected me twice. But this latter part, where I become a victim to, I would say the same organisation again. It's affected me in a different way, and how I've survived is by drawing on my spirituality, being strategic. Keep trying to see it as a survival exercise. Keep trying to push where I'm covered by law. Keep fighting for each day. Keep trying to hope that someone or something will come into play and ideally protect me, but realising that in reality, where you ought to be treated as a priority, it's not actually the case. The harsh reality of it is economically is what really matters to many organisations. The authorities do not protect.
The
and
UK
this is where
authorities
I felt
didn't protect you.
no, this is where I felt categorically I'd been exploited, and I would go so far back as to in the past where when I came back to this country, I felt that's where the starting point came from one authority. And
In terms of the exploitation.
yeah,
Okay.
they see you as a professional, and institutional racism is where I feel the true source of this is. You see you as a
Wow.
black female keeping everything together, being a high achiever, and they've decided from an institutional point of view, from an authority, they will decide whether you remain that way or not. And I believe that is where I became a victim to the system.
Wow. Wow, people. I'm sad to say that this is a statement and testimony that is duplicated from countless powerful, genii, amazing, humble. You could probably, even though you can't see this sister, you could probably feel by her voice that she's a humble soul. This is somebody who was ambitious, a go-getter, but she's humble, pious. You can hear that in her voice. I'm sure you can pick that up. And like myself and many others, has been brutalized in the UK. And this is a story that needs to be told, people. So please share this testimony. Thank you, Horizon, for sharing your testimony in two parts. If you've got a testimony, please make a short video, put it in the comments so that I can share it with the audiences. Please stay safe, everybody. There is exploitation massively in the UK. Racism, institutional racism, and abuse, and picking off people one by one in order to murder us. That's just the reality of it. All the bright sparks. So thank you, my sister. I'm going to sign off here. Take care, everybody in the audience, till the next video. Seven from London signing out.